talk about markets, talk about investing, talk about trading. I used to be a financial journalist, and prior to that I was a stock trader and professional derivatives trader.
One of the things that is definitely different today, live environment, so we've got people all around us, is just as kind of a new thing for me. I would like to ask you what are some of the things that you've seen at FinCon that are maybe interesting from your perspective as someone who's trying to teach more about your app and maybe investing overall to the crowd here.
I think what I've really seen at FinCon is there's people with all different types of experience and different levels of knowledge about investing, about being an influencer, about marketing. So you're really seeing, it's FinCon is an influencer conference, but it goes way beyond that. There's the brands here, and then there's all the support ecosystem that goes into that. So even among the influencers, you have people that are, kind of all over the map within the financial world. Maybe they're doing travel hacking, maybe they're into, just straight stock investing, or some of the people are into, specialize in retirement. So the nice part is, no matter who you are, you can learn something here. And there's great seminars. I went to a few seminars this morning, and learn a lot about what's going on in personal finance, in different niches of personal finance. I read that you used to be in the military.
Correct. So a lot of my background and the way that I got started was I had a lot of people around me that kind of understood, the military has consistent pay, and you're not paying for things like rent or, maybe transportation if you're in the right areas, and a lot of the things that typically you would have to take care of as someone who's not on government dime. A lot of people expect that you're financially stable because, you're being taken care of in a lot of ways. The government will, when you're in the military, take a lot of those financial burdens away. But then I think it almost opens up some of the younger crowd to making more financially risky behavior and choices. So
yeah, I think, obviously, and something I wanted to ask you about, because, your housing and your food are heavily subsidized, you're going to have a lot of disposable income. But at the same point, most of the people in the military are very young, and their financial literacy is probably relatively low. And so, did the military have any programs that helped you to invest or learn about trading?
So I think I was lucky in a way because I had mentorship that was really active about trying to determine what financial concerns were, and a lot of the things that were being done in the military financially when I joined started changing. So for instance, the entirety of the retirement system shifted over from a legacy system that was designed for people who were later on in service, pushing their final contract, whether it's those last 4 years in the military and then they're getting out, or they're just senior, and so they have a higher base pay, and those last high 3 years were used to calculate what their retirement dollar would be, and they would earn a pension. So now they've transitioned to what they call a blended retirement system, and that allows for a larger majority of active duty military to be able to invest and receive a match on their 401k, and there's more options available. For instance, the thrift savings plan has opened up a mutual fund window, so there's more variety available. But I don't think the way that it's being executed is perfect. There are a lot of issues in those early stages. So when you're just starting, you get taught, here's your banking account, and this is what you're going to be paid. You can allocate whatever percent you desire to your retirement. But beyond that conversation, it's not really guaranteed that you'll be talking about finances again. Things are getting better, don't get me wrong, but at some point there's a disconnect between the training piece and the actual execution. So a lot of people end up, I've seen senior enlisted or people who are further along in their military service end up where they've never touched their retirement account, and it's been in slow growth for 12 years. So out of their 20-year potential contract, they've now spent 12 not actively touching their retirement account, and it's seen next to no growth.
Yeah, it's one of the things I've come to MooMoo to do is kind of bridge that gap from you just start out as a beginner, and we have some great tools for advanced traders, but if you are a beginner, we also want to get you to that space. And so what we've done is we've made a lot of educational videos, even including things like options that you can learn about in your free time when you can, and get comfortable with the trading process. We also have paper trading, where you trade an account that's just like any other real account, but it's not real money. And I think that's when you were able to do something like that, that gets you familiar with like how to execute a trade, what a limit trade is, what a market trade, a market order is. And when you're able to do these things without risking your own money, it helps you. A lot of times you can read all the books you want, but until you go and do something, you don't really get it. So we can give you the book knowledge through our videos, and then we can also give you the real world knowledge of you go out and do something, and that's how you can learn to do it, but without the risk. And then when you're ready, we have you can fund your account with literally the least amount of money you want. So we don't put any minimum on the amount you can trade, and we have free stock trading, free level 2 quotes, free news, and some really free good free real-time data. And so all of this is at your disposal so that you can make some really informed decisions. And we also have a great community, a social community. It's one of the unique parts of our app that allows you to talk to other traders just in your boat. So if you're beginners, there's beginners there, and you can befriend them and talk about certain stocks and the markets. And there's a lot of more advanced traders on the platform as well that are willing to volunteer their knowledge and how they did it. And the whole thing is a journey, and it's getting there. But if you can start out young investing, you're so far ahead of the game, because I know so many people in their 40s and 50s, they didn't get into investing until much later in their life. And at that point, it's harder to grow it. When you can start growing your wealth at 20 years old, by the time you're 65, you're likely to have done very well.
Just speaking from the perspective of there's so many fintech options available, and there's so much choice overload that people face when they're trying to get into the world of investing. We've seen an uptick not only in the interest level, but the actual use of fintech. What would be my audience, 18 to 35, people are starting to drum up more and more interest, and there's less and less of question marks around it. Everybody kind of knows what online brokers are now, and everybody has an app on their phone where they can track their finances or invest in a stock that they're interested in. But I think one of the approaches that you guys have taken into your own hands is that educational piece, and maybe specifically working towards a more knowledgeable user base and trying to provide more than just the capability to invest in options, stocks, whatever it might be, but instead you're also, lending a hand. Like, do you know about this?
Yeah, exactly. The way I look at it is the more knowledge people can accumulate, the more likely they're going to be successful. And we want all of our traders to be successful. And so the more knowledge we can provide, the more successful they can become, and they help us. If we have traders that are unsuccessful, the business is not going to do well. So you really want to kind of turn that around, and the way you do that is through education, because the more you're educated about the markets, the better you're going to understand what's going on, and likely the better trades you're going to do.
I think another one of the obstacles that I've seen, at least for younger traders and people that have just gotten started, is a lot of times they'll be so focused on the social media side of things, where they idealize whatever they see online, and it becomes almost this roadblock in the future where, I'm not having as much success as, say, this person I follow on Instagram or Facebook, and then they are almost discouraged. But there's so much social media kind of involvement in the finance world where we kind of have to start determining what's actually valuable and what's not. But a lot of people kind of take the first thing that's available to them and they run with it. So what would you say is a way that maybe MooMoo or maybe even just your own experience and advice related to a deeper understanding in real world actually executing investments and making your own financial decisions versus just having a herd mentality and jumping into whatever the newest thing is and where the buzz happens to be online.
Yeah, and I basically would have two things I would offer. One is again our MooMoo community, where you can identify, like, you don't want to be chasing and learning this stuff about someone that makes millions and millions of dollars when you're just trying to make $100. So get your community together, get the people that are at your level, find them, and you can find them on our app, and you're going to learn together. You'll make mistakes, but those mistakes will be small, and you'll grow together. And when you have that sense of community, I think it's important to, it's always great to learn from great traders. It's like, your professor at school, but you also have to talk with the students that are in the same boat as you. And the other thing I would say is something that you probably learned a lot about in the military is discipline. So one of the most important things to start out in trading is, you can have all the great ideas you want, but if you don't have the discipline to get it in and out of the trades and have a plan, even before you get into the trade, those are the types of things that are going to make you way more successful than you would think. Because a lot of times when you have a plan and you have the discipline and you get out for a small loss, you learn a little bit and you're going to get back in and you're going to make that money the next time. What you really want to avoid is getting blown out and taking these big losses and again, chasing some of these stocks that are sometimes blown up by herd mentality beyond what their true fundamentals are.
And it's a core belief of mine that a lot of the way people deal with money has to do with a lot of their experiences and their behavioral aspects in life. So if someone's more risky and they have a lot more of kind of almost a gambling mentality about it, they're not really caring so much about, is this a safe investment? They're focused on, what's the highest percentage of return I could get? And I think a lot of people get overly concerned with the idea that, maybe everybody around me is kind of in the same boat as I am, so I need to listen to someone who's got more knowledge and experience in the same industry. Or I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea that I don't know anything, so I'm just going to seek like the first beacon of light that I come across. There might be people around you that you haven't talked to or haven't associated with, and they might know some things that you didn't. So I think it's important to learn at all levels instead of just focusing on, this person's got 20 million followers, so whatever they say is like...
The other thing I would note is, everyone's always focused on the people that do well. You never hear about the people that don't do well. And
Right.
you probably, for those people that are willing to talk about that, a lot of people aren't, because it's embarrassing. But the people that do, you could probably learn 10 times more from someone that has had significant losses or has made mistakes than you will. And the problem that it creates is when you're always hearing about people that only win, you just think that's how it is, and it's just not. And so,
Or even the perception that they only
exactly.
win.
There's that perception,
Because it could very much in reality be the exact opposite. They could be losing all the time and just not telling somebody.
So, see, the other part is, it's very interesting because traders, the individual investor or trader has their own psychology. The market has psychology too. And so the other aspect that a lot of people don't realize is trading is a huge amount of psychology in it, and understanding that, and understanding fear and greed and how it can overreact a lot of times in markets. And we saw it during COVID, because when COVID began, really no one knew what was going to happen, right? You didn't know really how bad it was. And now we've defined the goalposts of COVID. We kind of have at least, an area where we kind of know what the risk is. But when it first hit, you didn't know any risk. And when you can't evaluate the risk, a lot of times people just sell everything. And that's not necessarily the right reaction. So we saw the market go way down, in the months right after COVID, because everyone panicked. And then people slowly realized that, number one, the government was going to step in and help businesses, and number two, that the economy was going to come back, and that we were going to be able to beat this thing to some extent. And so those are the types of things that you can look for in trading, is really look at the psychology, and it exists on a market level and in a stock level. So that part of it, and interpreting that, is a really hard skill to learn, but it is a very good skill for traders to learn.
Right, and like you were saying, this guy's giving away $500, he said? Oh, interesting. But like you were saying, the psychological aspect of money, whether it's your first time investing or you've experienced that loss, there's a lot of different levels of understanding. One of the ways I like to describe it is you can know something in your head, but there's a time when you start to know it in your heart, where it's like, I'm really confident about the way I'm investing, and then all of a sudden something really detrimental and heart-wrenching happens, and now I have no idea how I got here and how to get out of this situation. Kind of what I'm playing into is the Dunning-Kruger effect, and how confidence and competence plays a role in finance and investing. It's something that I've touched on a few times, but just understanding that your emotions play such a large factor in the way that you invest and manage your finances can be helpful for people to gauge where they're at in life. Like, am I being overly concerned with something that I can just hold and potentially profit on instead of selling like I feel like I need to? I think that's interesting to kind of understand from any level, where it's like nothing's going to be a success overnight. The things that are typically temporary. I was definitely curious when we were talking. You spoke a little bit about your background, but what kind of brought you into not only MooMoo, but trying to provide financial resources for some of those folks that need it more than others?
So yeah, I mean, a lot of my career has been focused on institutional investors, the very big hedge funds. But at MooMoo, with the MooMoo app, I definitely have an opportunity to work with retail customers, and in a certain way, it's a lot more rewarding, because you're helping people probably that need it the most, and it's great, particularly young people. I love to see young people get involved with trading, in thinking about their financial futures.
Definitely wanted to go over it, because yesterday I actually went up to the MooMoo booth here at FinCon, and I did a little bit of study time, got in with not only looking through the website and looking through what the pamphlets were at the booth, but also I had Gabe, who ran me through some of what the app does and some of the things that are available. Jumping right in, like he was scrolling around and he was showing me industry by industry. You can pick a catalog and it'll show you all these companies that work in an industry you're interested in, and you can see good and bad, how things are working out within an industry, and who the key players are, who you might want to be investing in more than others. And there's also, beyond that, just insights, and like you spoke on, there's educational pieces where you can learn how to trade options. You can learn some of the pros and cons to investment strategies and investment decisions that you might potentially want to pursue. And I think that sets it apart from a lot of other investment apps, which just kind of give you bare bones, whether it's just the fundamental aspects and traditional investing, or it's analytical and you're following charts. I think there's more to what MooMoo offers in the way of education and kind of sectioning off things that people would have interest in. So it plays back into that community aspect, where it's like, okay, there's this many people in a group that I've created, and they're all interested in the same types of industries. So now we're almost kind of crowdsourcing what the best options are for us, and where we can see growth, and how we can build our wealth and knowledge about a specific industry, a specific stock, whatever it might be.
Yeah, we definitely try to help the investor realize their ideas. So a lot of times your ideas are somewhat vague. You're like, I know this industry, I know it very well, I want to see, and I want to be able to filter some of these stocks. So what we can do is we have different filters, and you can say, well, I really want a certain amount of cash flow coming from the company. You can say, well, then I'll select this cash flow above a certain level, and that'll narrow it down further. And then you might want to say, well, I also want to filter for a certain amount of revenue growth, and I can find that too. And that way you can realize kind of the companies that you're interested in investing that have the type of financial profile that you're looking for.
One of the things that really struck me was just the ease of use. You could switch really quickly from, let's say, aerospace to defense stocks or energy, and I think it's interesting for people to have such a wealth of knowledge at the touch of a button versus, before we had these kind of apps and technologies, you would be digging in the library for a few hours. What are some things that, through working with MooMoo and as a VP of strategy, maybe from your level, that you've learned in the process of working with the app and understanding it?
So one of the great things I like to fool around with the app, and it's kind of great because it's kind of self-learning. So when I go in there, sometimes I'll look at, we have a heat map, and the heat map kind of shows you the percentage returns of particular sectors and subsectors during the day. So I'll always look at that and say, well, let me see how this sector did versus the overall market for the day, and what other sectors are similar to this, which ones trade down and up. So that's something that I've definitely learned from the app, try to figure out kind of which sectors might trade together and which sectors might outperform on certain days, given certain news. So the heat map is definitely something that I look at a good amount to see what's going on, not just on a market level, but more on a sector and subsector level.
What are, if you had like one or two things that you would like to improve, and then one or two things that you would like to kind of maybe not improve but correct or change that would make the app more streamlined, or what would you do that would provide additional benefit to users if you had to choose?
Yeah, I mean, there's basically two things that I really want to do is just grow the educational piece more. So, I'm always looking for different ways to educate people. So if it's videos, if it's coming here on a podcast, whatever it is. So the more avenues I have to educate users and the more things that we can put on the app that are educational, to me, it's better. And about different topics, whether that's options, whether it's about technical trading, fundamental trading, just starting out, or for advanced traders. So, there's so much more that we could do on the educational piece, and I'm looking forward to ramping that up. And then the other part of it would be the community. And I try to get involved in the community, talking with people, but I'd really love to try to really get the community going and kind of match up the users, certain users I think would match up well with each other, and so having something that's more filterable that we can match up some of those users might be something that would be really good.
Speaking on user trends and kind of the direction of, delivering the most benefit for, the user's time and how much they've, whether they've invested a little or a lot, what would you say, if you've seen anything significant, what user trends in the past couple months, couple years has MooMoo kind of seen, and what indicators of like financial confidence, and through learning within the app, what have you seen within the user base improve from where people start and where people are after using MooMoo as an investment platform?
Well, I think part of it, what I've definitely seen is there's a lot more small traders and a lot younger traders that have been trading over the last 2 years. I think the COVID pandemic had a little bit to do with that. But the good part is it's got them involved and they've stayed. A lot of people thought, well, they're going to get their stimulus checks or they're not working now and they have time to trade, and then when it's over, they're going to stop trading. But I think they really caught the investing bug, they caught the trading bug, and they realized how great it was, and they're able to use the MooMoo app, and it's something that they learn and grow with, and they've built their some of them have built their accounts up using it over the last 2 years.
I think it's more than fair to say that there's such a substantial amount of new money coming into the markets from the perspective of, when you lock 18 to 24-year-olds in a room and tell them, don't go outside, they have only a limited option of new things to do. So if they're looking into fintech I think it plays right into the whole idea of bringing the younger crowd into investing, finance, saving money. That way, maybe when they're older, they won't have to do as much work to catch up to, say, whatever goals they had set when they were younger for themselves financially.
I think Generation Z is more frugal than millennials, and I think the pandemic in part has made them that way, and they're more likely to invest earlier. I think millennials, went through the Great Recession and the housing crash in 06 and 07, 08, and that area, and it has spooked some of them, and they never got back in. And Gen Z hasn't really seen that, and I think they've heard about it, and they're being cautious, and they're kind of doing the right thing, and a little bit of different style than their cohorts that are 10 years older or so.
I think the more we continue to develop technology, it's almost become the go-to when there's hardship in the world, where before, like you said, with 08, since then, we haven't seen, true financial recession on the same cyclic basis that it was before. You'd see something every, give or take 5 years. Now it's been about a decade. So I think the more we involve ourselves with time, investing our time in learning a platform that can help us, whether it's with machine learning and understanding stock trends, or even an investment app where, you learn a few things, spend some time dedicating yourself to whatever it is you want to do, whether it's stocks, options, or any external investment opportunities. If you're using technology, I think there's something to be said about, the gap between hard times growing further and further apart, and being able to recover in a different way than we used to be able to. I think what a lot of people kind of underestimate is the true power of using technology to our benefit, and rather than being stuck inside scrolling Instagram all day, a lot of people have driven away from that, and they're like, no, I want to start my own business. I want to invest in companies that are going to grow really fast, or they're going to benefit me over time. And whatever it is, I think financial technology is improving, and I think that our capability of understanding more complex financial ideas is also improving. And I think that MooMoo and other financial technologies play a huge part in that. And that's why I focus on things like financial technology companies, people who own their own businesses. I focus on even to go as far as, like, here at FinCon, we've got, like you said, a bunch of social media experts and people who are very confident in speaking on money in a public setting versus, the way it's traditionally been. It's a prohibited conversation. You don't talk about it, whether it's, you can't talk about church, religion, politics. You can't talk about sex or money. So then people have driven away from that, where they're like, I'm locked inside all day. I'm not making money at my job. Nobody's able to even go into work. So now we're all in a different headspace. And I think with all the bad that COVID brought, and all of the news that you see all day long with numbers scrolling across the bottom of your screen about how bad everything is, there's so much silver lining with the idea that there's a huge movement towards becoming more financially independent, becoming more financially successful, and leveraging technology to its fullest capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the technology piece in particular, it opened the door to a level, a people that have less money, and it's that it's really been like that in the financial industry since the 80s, when people, at some point you had to get on the phone and call your broker up, and they're going to charge you $100 for a brokerage fee, and now it's free. So. And now you do it on your phone, and there's an ease of use, and to me, it's great because you don't have to be wealthy to be a stock investor. And even like you said, and beyond stocks, just to go and start your business now, there's never been a better time to start your business. It's never been easier. And if you think about something just like doing this podcast, or someone making a video recording, the recording equipment is so cheap now that, a lot of people could afford it on their own, where, 20 or 30 years ago, you'd need to hire a production team. You wouldn't be able to afford it on your own to do something like that. So the business startup costs for so many businesses, because of the internet, because of technology, have gotten so cheap, and allows people to get in at the ground floor and then scale from there.
Yeah. And I think the potential for success, the age limits and the financial limits that have been key factors in determining someone's success are becoming less and less of an issue. There's people who are younger than me who are millionaires all over the world. And that's not to say that it's easy. I don't think anything happens overnight. But there's a new culture surrounding money, and I think FinCon's a huge part of that. I think there are other conferences and other avenues to learn, but so much of what is surrounding us right now it's a huge factor in where the industry as a whole is going with finance, and where people are trying to bring better financial solutions to that base level, that customer that needs it the most, like we talked about. Coming out of FinCon, what are some ideas that you've kind of gathered from people around you here, and what are some of the things that you've taken notes on? What ideas have you gotten coming to FinCon, and what would you say about some of the things that you've learned here?
So I think part of it really has to do, coming here initially, I was really just thinking about influencers and how I would network and interact with influencers, and kind of what the best way to work with influencers would be. But what I found networking with everyone is there's so many different avenues just working with influencers. There's so many other people here, and basically I have a lot to learn. So I got to go back and do a little bit more research, and I think there's a lot of other avenues to promote trading through our app and get people interested. And so the greatest part I've gotten here is that there's so many people who have great ideas, and it's really about how can I realize those ideas, or take those ideas that they have and kind of make them my own, or marry them to the app, or partner up with other people.
I agree, and I think there's a unique flavor here with just the level of fluid interactions where you can talk to people who have started multiple companies, people who are so financially set for the rest of their lives, and they're either really young or they've just done things in such a different way. And I think the ability to think differently is so easy here because there's so many different people from different backgrounds. If there was one thing that you would change about the way that you've kind of come into the financial industry, or one thing that you would improve about your background, what would you do to maybe set yourself on an even better trajectory than you already have?
I think part of it is just continue to be more open to new ideas and what's going on. I think the more I can listen to people, and the more I can learn from people.
So another another one of the kind of interesting things was I got here, and sitting at the table, it wasn't even 10 minutes before somebody threw 2 books on the table, and they said, "Here, read this." So considering how much information there is and the ideas of information overload, what is one thing that you would pick out as a lesson learned, or something that you didn't know before you came?
Yeah, you definitely have to pick your spots at some point. You have to think. You always really should come in ahead of time and kind of have at least. The way I look at if I come to any type of conference, I want to have a base plan. This is the types of things I want to accomplish. But you always want to be open to other things. But at the same point, you got to make sure you refocus yourself and say, if I came to this conference and I have certain objectives, I want to meet some influencers, I want to talk about the MooMoo app, I want to do these types of things, and you got to make sure you do those. And then beyond that, you could say, look, what can I branch out into and talk with other people about? But everyone only has so much time, and so that is always the hard trick to say, there's certain aspects that maybe, I'm not going to learn about this time. But the other thing I like to do is, I'll see something interesting and I know, well, maybe I don't have time now to do it, but let me get that person's information. Maybe I'll contact them later, in the week or later in this month, or, I saw an idea, I'll jot it down in my notebook and say, let me get back to that. And I think I wouldn't, not only for conferences, but that's something you can do as a trader or an investor. You say, well, I thought of an idea and I'm here doing my trade, but I was focused on this other trade. Maybe you're doing one particular trade, but then this other idea kind of pops into your head. Jot a note, write it down, get back to it, but go back and focus on your original thing. And so I think I'm a big fan of doing that, taking a note and saying, let me get back to it later.
I think that almost plays into like that educational piece and that wanting to be so hungry for knowledge and learn more from people that you haven't talked to before, where it's like, if it wasn't for, let's say, Instagram, I wouldn't even be at this conference speaking to anyone right now. So it's like, there are so many people and so many places that you can go to learn more. I just think it's the critical thing and the key component to all of it is just keeping an open mind and wanting to always learn, whether you're, say a VP of strategy in a fintech company or you're a podcast guy starting out of his garage. There's so many people that will be willing to sit down and talk to you, that whether you have, an hour in the day or you have 10 minutes, if you can dedicate time to learning, I think it's more valuable than, let's say, blowing it off and then never coming back to it. Like you said, you might not have all the time in the world right now, but if you're taking notes and you're being active about, I have ambitions and goals, this guy has similar interests, group or crowd, or this company wants to kind of help expose some of the things that I'm interested in, why would you not take that opportunity, And I think it's important to tackle that.
The other thing I was mentioned is, there's a great focus on learning, but the other thing you should think about is teaching or hashing out your idea. So you can teach someone something. I was talking to a young man last night about real estate, and he got his notebook out, started writing everything down I said, because I know a lot about the real estate crash and kind of what's happened. But when you teach or when you talk about something and you express your ideas, it almost starts to have you reformulate them and think about them, and then you also listen to what they have to say, and it informs your opinion, and it just grows stronger. So the good part is, you don't always have to be learning. You could just tell people, these are some of my ideas. What do you think? And maybe you have great ideas, maybe you don't. And a lot of times when I don't have great ideas, those are the ones you're more embarrassed to talk about them, because they're not hashed out yet. But someone will say, have you thought about that? Have you thought about this? And I'm like, well, no. But I will, and so you go back and you reformulate those ideas, and it makes them better. And those are the types of things that really help you grow. It's not just about this educational learning piece. The education can be done through teaching and focusing and telling people about your ideas.
Yeah, I think that plays into kind of like analyzing everyone and kind of saying, this guy sounds crazy now. One of the things I was definitely wanting to kind of address is the idea that, like we've said before, but it is so important. And you spoke to, you may not have everything figured out, but there are things that you've learned along the way that you're now able to teach folks. And it helps to understand that from like a psychological standpoint, where I'm not sure if you're like well aware of how this Maslow's hierarchy of need, where it's like, not everybody's in like the perfect position. So at some point, the more you progress, the more you're able to help the people who are in the same position as you were. And at some point, what once became a position of need can now become, you've learned all the lessons that person still has to. So you can kind of reach back down, and now you're in a position that's more philanthropic, and you're reaching out and helping people. And it's interesting to think, just because you've failed in the past or you've had issues where, you didn't know things and you felt less confident, doesn't mean that you'll be that way forever. And there's an opportunity, like you said, to teach others and to bring others up with you. And I think, especially with MooMoo, where it's like there's a community to the tool. Someone might not have had the best returns, but they've also built themselves up and learned things using the app. So now they can provide feedback to other people who are struggling, or, you know, there's another user who wants to learn more about the topic, and I just spent, 30 minutes doing the same thing and learning about it. So now I can just almost regurgitate the same information to them or provide them the same resource. And now we're all smarter and better for having learned together and being taught together. Now we're all teachers together. So I think there's something to be said for progression of knowledge, and especially within the financial space. There's so many opportunities to learn and teach. And that's kind of the whole point of my podcast, where it's like, I don't know everything. I know what I've learned through pain along the way and through reaching out to other people and understanding what they have to say. And then there's also the aspect that bringing folks like yourself on, I'm learning from you actively, and I'm going to be able to kind of have a different perspective and new insights as I move forward and talk to other folks. And I think that's critical to anyone who's trying to gain knowledge or build a community around the topics they're interested in. There's two directions to knowledge. It goes both ways.
Yeah, and you know that so well as a podcaster. I mean, because you're right in that catbird seat doing that. And on the other side, you can have, like I said, people will get stuff out from listening to your podcast, but they'll get more out from commenting on it and having you interact with them afterward, just like we do on our app. I mean, you can just read what our community says and you're going to learn something, but you're going to learn more if you participate and say, well, I think this, or I don't quite understand what you're trying to say. Can you explain it more? And you're going to get more out of it when you get interactive, and people will come back and you learn. And that's kind of the nice part about some of these podcasts. You and I can talk, but then this podcast can then go live on the internet and people can comment on it, and then it could live beyond just you and I here today.
Absolutely, yeah. If there was one thing that you had to, learn, or one thing that you wish you had known when you were just starting out, working your first job, or having those first kind of pains in growing and learning things about finance, what would that be? And then where can people learn more about MooMoo, yourself, and the things that you're doing in the finance industry, in the finance world?
So yeah, I guess the biggest thing is that I think that I wish I knew when I was younger is really start thinking about retirement from a very early age. I thought about it, and I was already contributing at a young age, but you really don't, you really should go and kind of plot it out and have a plan, and that plan might change, but I think a lot of people really don't get serious on retirement until they're in their 30s and 40s. They might be contributing, but they don't have a real plan to say, this is, what I'm looking to do. And also think about the biggest thing I probably want that you don't think about when you're 21 years old. You think you're invincible, right? You don't think, well, what if my health fails, or what if the world ends, or you don't think about things that could happen. And so having some type of contingency plan when something really bad can happen. Luckily in my life I've never had anything really bad, but it happens to people, at some point, and it could happen to you, it could happen to me, and having, at least thinking about that and saying, what is my plan around that, and having a plan, even when you're young, to do that type of thing. Have a will, think about what you would do if you're incapacitated or something like that. And what was the last question again? Okay,
so yeah, just to rehash, you spoke on such a great point where, if there's one thing that people can do, it's get started. And the faster that you start, the less time it's going to take you to kind of reach some of those goals. And then lastly, just going into...
Yeah, so I just generally speaking of that, I would encourage everyone to go ahead and download the app on your phone, in one of the app stores. It's the MooMoo US app, and you can get it right there, and you can get started in learning. You don't have to start trading right away, with your real money, but you can do that when you're ready. But you can't do it until you get started. So the first thing to do is go and download that app and just start exploring and get into the community and ask questions, and we'll be there to help you.
And I think it's important knowing that there's an option for you to be able to learn and develop your skills, whether it's finance or whatever else you're interested in. There's huge opportunities out there. Where can people find out more about the company beyond just using the app? Where can people learn more if they're interested about the company, yourself, and some of the efforts that you've got going in the world of finance?
So, you can go to the website, MooMoo.com. We are a subsidiary of Futu Holdings, and that's our parent company, which is listed on the U.S. Stock Exchange. So you can also go to their website and kind of learn a little bit more about our global leaders.
All right, Justin, I definitely appreciate your time, and I know there's a lot that's still left to do. I definitely hope you've enjoyed your time so far at FinCon, and I hope there's more for both of us to engage and learn in.
Yeah, but Dawson, I really appreciate you having me on your podcast, and I hope to speak with you again in the future sometime, a little bit more in length about different things and see how things have developed in the next few months.
Absolutely, and likewise, the same thing back to you. I hope there's growth and even more opportunities for folks to learn and grow, both in the company and by using the app and developing their own, personal finance journey and goals. But like I said, yeah, it was definitely a joy to listen to you talk and, kind of ask some of the questions that I had burning after looking up the company and having that one-on-one interaction with Gabe at the booth. Definitely learned a lot, not only about the app, but about some of the efforts that you guys have going in finance.